I'm Cory Haala. I teach American history and museum studies at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. To be a historian to me means to tell stories, but in a fully researched and fleshed out way that takes into account multiple perspectives, that takes into account what's come before us, and to attempt to add to our understanding of events, to add to our understanding of groups, of movements, of time periods, and to both kind of correct or add to work that's come before us, but also to lift up the voices of other people who haven't been heard in those stories or who played a central role that we can amplify. What I always tell my students when you're interpreting sources, particularly on tense political topics or in times that everybody's a little on edge about whatever it is you're talking about, is to come correct, to have as many sources, to have as many facts, to base what you do not in gut feeling, gut instinct, but as best you can to make sure that you're doing the research, that you're bringing in as many perspectives as you can, that you've read all the secondary literature, all the history books and articles, as dense as they might be, as old as they might be, to read through them to make sure that first you know what you're talking about, and that second you are telling as complete a story as is possible. And being honest about those gaps doesn't mean that suddenly you're wrong, right? It doesn't mean that suddenly you're a bad person, that you're doing this intentionally or maliciously. It just means there's more to learn, right? If we just, kind of clapped our hands and said, okay, history's done and decided, well, let's call it a day, and then we're not going to learn we're not going to add anything to these stories, and our field's going to stagnate. But our understanding of ourselves, our communities, is going to stagnate. By acknowledging those limitations, you're setting up people to do that work. By acknowledging in the books that I write, there are things that are incomplete. It's setting up, you, the students, other people to go out and do that work and to add to those understandings, because you're going to approach these topics in ways that I haven't. You're going to bring perspectives and you're going to bring your voice in that I can't match no matter how hard I try. And so acknowledging those things as a historian isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength, and it's a sign that you want a robust field of history and continued robust research on things that we as historians really personally care about. When you're dealing with multiple accounts, oftentimes there will be written sources, there will be oral recollections, there will be official government documents, and to create a complete picture of what happened, it's incumbent upon you, the historian, to say, well, here's what's reliable, here's what's hearsay, and to sift between those things and say, well, hearsay isn't completely invalid, but some facts that we have are better than others. So one event that I teach and that I research is what's called the Wisconsin Walleye Wars. Native activists in the 1970s and 80s exerting spearfishing rights when they signed treaties with the federal government in the 1830s and 40s, so 150 years prior, giving up their land or ceding control of it to the federal government. They retained and reserved rights to spearfish on lakes that were now off the reservations they were confined to. And when they began reasserting those rights in the 1970s and 80s and spearfishing out of season, something really controversial in kind of the Northwoods and environmentally focused or sport fishing focused areas, there was community uproar. There was sportsman uproar. This is going to destroy the population of walleye. And eventually a federal judge ruled that these activists had the right to spearfish. And so that's the kind of the groundwork that we're working with, right? They have the right to do this. And then it turned ugly. You had people lining the boat launches, protesting, shouting racial slurs, and this is caught on video, right, of all these kinds of protests. There's a whole documentary about it. But then students will watch that and say, well, no, but my grandpa remembers that there were folks who were treating him badly as just a resident of northern Wisconsin. But they were treating him badly, or they were shouting this back at him. And the problem is we have to say that doesn't invalidate their perspective, but we have these things on camera. We have these things recorded. We have these things printed in the newspaper. And we need to weigh the validity of something that might be filtered through multiple sources versus what we'd consider a primary source. What we can see firsthand in front of us. Taking those things into account and not saying, well, we're just going to kick other perspectives to the curb, but also we we owe it to our profession, and we owe it to the stories of the people we're telling to be as accurate and to be as truthful as we can. And that involves saying, even if it's something that makes me personally uncomfortable, here's what I have in front of me.